How's it going, everyone? This is Kevin. Today I want to bring along with me to talk about why I believe that the Sony A7 IV needs 4K 120 to be legendary. So let's jump right into it. As we know, with the upcoming release of the A7 IV by Sony, it's a very anticipated follow-up of the Sony A7 III. A lot of you guys, including myself, are waiting for this new camera to be announced and all these rumors to be done with because we want the finalized product to know if we need to wait for it or if we need to be sadly investing more money into the A7S III. Now, when I'm talking about the 4K 120 and why it needs it to be able to become legendary is because the Sony A7 III has had a legendary status among the mirrorless cameras with everything that it has packed into it. It has 4K up to 30 and it has a 1080p, the 60 and the 120, but that's the one thing that most people tend to not realize, I guess, is that the Sony A7S II has all the same specs as the Sony A7 III. The only major difference that I can tell is just the megapixel count. So I think for the Sony A7 IV to be relevant in 2021 to 2022 area, because you want this to last a lot longer going forward, it has to have 4K 120. Now, don't get me wrong, it does not have to have 10-bit or 4222 all the way through. If it can get 4K 120, 10-bit 420, that's fine with me. Or even if we can get 1080p 120 10-bit, at least it's better manageable for the color and everything like that. But with everything said, I think it still needs to have 4K 120, despite everybody talking about how with 4K 60, 10-bit, 422 all the way through would be great and that's enough. Yes and no. For me personally, I think 4K 60, 10-bit, 4222 going all the way through in a sense is phenomenal and everything in between. But I think with this camera to really become the legendary status to overtake the Sony A7 III, it has to offer 4K 120. Now the good old conversation and I guess good old debate will be, well, it can't outshine the Sony A7 III because sales of that will drop and this and that and everything. Have you met Sony? What did they do with the Sony FX3 and the Sony A7S III? Essentially, they already kind of killed the Sony A7S III, in my opinion, when it comes down to that, because most people tend to go with the FX3 because of the smaller size and factor and all the customization you can do within the camera itself without having to add a cage. And a lot of people tend to like that a lot, at least from the people that I've seen that they have the Sony A7 FX3 compared to the A7S III. So now, that to me gives me the incentive that I think Sony is not so much caring that it'll maybe take off a camera for sure, because if people are going to want a hybrid camera, they're going to want the Sony A7 IV versus the Sony A7S III. Whether it has 4K 120 or not, that's up to the debate. They'll still want a good hybrid camera, just like how the Sony A7 III is. With the Sony A7S III, you can do the photography with the 12 megapixels. It's not horrible, but I know people's mind, they want to have a little bit more megapixels for in case of cropping, whatever they need to do with social media. So for me, the Sony A7S III is more of a video shooter camera, where the Sony A7 IV would be more of a hybrid. So with that said, I think having 4K 120, whether it's 8-bit or even 10-bit 420, I think it'll still be a perfect camera for people to go with as a second camera even of their Sony A7S III, because they can correlate them together. That way they have a good shooter as well, because most people that I know have two cameras in their body for work and everything like that. Most of them buy two Sony A7S IIIs or FX IIIs or A7 IIIs, whatever you want to go with. They tend to have two cameras. So if you can kind of give them that good backup when it comes down to having 4K 120 all the way throughout, even if it's not the highest of quality of like 10-bit like the Sony A7S III, I think you would tie in everything like that together with the quality of the A7 IV for the price point that they're going to be probably going with $2,500, because it's going to be a little bit more expensive than when like the Sony A7 III came out with like a $2,000 just for the body. That's my opinion. That's my thoughts about it. But I honestly do believe that if they want the camera to be legendary like the Sony A7 III and for the sales volumes to compete with Canon, I guess Nikon and all those other companies that like are bringing out their A+ game for the most part, even like Lumix and everything like that, you want to be able to provide 4K 120 in this type of body, whether it's 8-bit or 10-bit 420, doesn't have to be 422 all the way throughout to not compete or whatever with the Sony A7 III. I think personally that will actually make this camera become ridiculously sold and still help Sony sell A7S IIIs, because people will still want to kind of pair those two together, since supposedly it's going to have a 33 megapixel sensor and it's going to be good for stills and video, but then you can have a good hybrid like kind of combination than having to get the R4 or eventually they come out with the R5 or whatever, which I don't think that's coming anytime soon. And also compared to the A1, nobody wants to spend $6,500 for one body and then have to spend another $3,500 with the A7S III to kind of combine them together. I think this would help Sony out with volume and also quality for their consumers, so that they can have the best kind of combination of an A7 IV with an A7S III or FX3, so that they can do video together nicely, but also do stills with that. But that's just my opinion. Let me know your opinion down below. Do you think it should have 4K 120? Realistically, do you think that it's possible to happen? I think it should, and I think it is possible to happen, but we shall know more once all these rumors are done with. But with all that said and done, guys, thank you so much for watching this video. Make sure you like and subscribe, share this video with a friend. I'll catch you guys in the next one. See ya.